How's it going? Welcome to the Blurred Wire. Today we're going to be talking about Transformers. I just got a chance to see Rise of Beast in theaters. I've been meaning to go see it for a while, but as far as the June movies, it kind of got pushed back. But I'm glad I got a chance to go see it. So now I can give my official ranking of the Transformers movies. And again, these rankings are going to be reflecting some pretty terrible movies because honestly the Transformers are not exactly cinematic masterpieces. However, when you want to see robots beating up other robots, this is what you get. Unfortunately, sometimes they don't even do that well. So, we'll start from the last one and then we'll slowly go up. So coming in at number 7, we've got Transformers: Age of Extinction. This movie brought in Mark Wahlberg, who I love as an actor. In The Other Guys, he was absolutely phenomenal and hilarious, and there's been a lot of other projects he was in that I loved, like a more recent one, Instant Family. He was super good in that one. So a phenomenal actor just placed in a terrible movie. Just absolutely, there are so many cringy lines, like I like to be, like when he was talking, asking his daughter's boyfriend why he got mouthwash, and he was like, oh, I like to be fresh when I'm making out with your daughter. Nobody would say that. Nobody would say that, especially to someone nobody would say that, especially to a man who does not want his daughter to date. And then he had another line about being protected by the Romeo and Juliet laws, so that way he can date a minor. It's just like, why do you even have that in the movie? Why not just make her 18 and avoid this statutory rape thing in your Transformers movie? Can we just focus on the robots, please? But focusing on the robots doesn't really work either, because now we've got Transformium, and then we've got Lockdown, who's trying to take Optimus Prime back to his captors. But like after the Battle of Chicago, I guess Optimus Prime is like dead battery wise and has to like recharge. It was terrible. On so many levels, people didn't think it could get worse, but it did. It did get a lot worse. It makes me physically ill thinking about how much money this movie made, because not only did it gross over $1 billion, but it was the top grossing movie of 2014. And 2014 was one of the greatest years for superhero movies ever. You had Guardians of the Galaxy, you had Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and then you had Days of Future Past. We got all three of those movies in 2014, and this crap stain of cinema beat them all by a landslide, because none of those movies even got close to $1 billion. So it hurts. It hurts from a fan's perspective, but I suppose we'll get over it. Anyway, horrible movie. Not really much else to say about it. Sometimes it's fun to watch. Like, the sad part is, like, it's also rewatchable just to see the robots fighting, but you usually just like skip to those scenes. And again, Lockdown, not a very compelling villain. Not to mention the scene where Mark Wahlberg is fighting Lockdown. How that scene is more than a second does not make any sense at all. Moving on. Before this, and he recruited them by punching one in the face. And then you remember that he only was able to do that because the Autobots snuck aboard, these giant clanky monsters snuck aboard Lockjaw's ship and freed Optimus Prime, and Lockjaw didn't notice that they took an escape ship at all. And that's when you kind of remember that you're actually watching a horrible movie. Now, coming in at number 6, we have Transformers: The Last Knight. It was honestly really hard for me to rank this movie over Age of Extinction. I'm like, if there was a way I could put them both like at the bottom, I would, and it's very close there. There's only a couple of reasons why I did it. Especially when I saw the scene where Mark had the whatever it was called, the pendulant or whatever, turn into this sword, and he blocked the sword blow from a 60-foot metal robot. And I'm like, even if that robot wasn't swinging at full force, Mark's arm is broken. and his entire body is just knocked away. There's no amount of force that that sword could have absorbed. So, unless we've got vibranium in the Transformers, like, again, the only reason why this movie did not rank lower than Age of Extinction was because Josh Duhamel came back, and his character, every time he's been on screen, he's been phenomenal. Even when the terrible stuff is going around, when the terrible movie plot, everything going on around him, his acting and his character is still often the best part of any of these films. So bringing him back saved this one from being last. But I feel like this was the movie where you could really tell that Michael Bay was running out of ideas, and the Transformers franchise was also running out of ideas on how to make stuff blow up. And Michael Bay continuously tries to give humans this idea on how dumb humans are. And it's like, I get it, but we are humans and we understand. Like the fact that they would even consider for a second working with Megatron to catch Cade Yeager and his Autobot friends. Autobots who have done nothing but defend the planet over and over and over again. Megatron, who's done nothing but tried to destroy the planet over and over and over again. They're going to partner up with him so he can catch Cade Yeager? What? It does not work on so many levels. They, of course, wasted the talents of Isabella Merced, who went by a different actress name, but she was the little girl Isabella in that movie. And she didn't do anything. Michael Bay didn't give her anything to do in that movie except for look at the camera a couple of times. Fortunately, we got to see her and Mark Wahlberg actually acting and giving good performances in Instant Family, which came out the next year, which was a hilarious movie, and I recommend anybody watch it. But it's a shame that this was kind of the movie that launched her career, but it was so bad. So bad. And I would love to say that he stopped with the over-sexualization, but unfortunately he did not. So, I would love to say that he stopped with the over-sexualization of his female characters, but of course, this is Michael Bay, so he did not. Coming in next at number 5, we have Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. And the sad part is, this is probably the movie where Transformers fell. Because everything was set up really well from the first one. And you'll see where I rank the first one in a little bit. And this movie just brought it all crashing down by putting way too much into the plot. Way too many, like, overly sexual jokes and innuendos and stuff. And I guess it was hard to be like, is this still, like, a kid's movie? Because, like, the first Transformers, your kid could see it, you know, potentially. But this one, he, like, took it to a whole nother level. And he wasn't even being subtle about it. And I mean, maybe it appealed to the people that grew up, like, watching Transformers and, like, now we're adults. But it still just felt super out of place and didn't really make a whole lot of sense. And again, he continued with the explosions. Don't really need a plot. Just going to keep blowing stuff up, and then people will just kind of figure it out. The best part of this movie, again, Shia LaBeouf's character, no matter the crazy things that were happening around him, still think he crushed his role as Sam Witwicky. It just... Michael Bay really lost a grip on it in this one. And this is probably where the Transformers franchises went down. And we'll never know where they could have been had Michael Bay not created such a terrible movie right here. Moving on to number 4, we have Transformers: Dark of the Moon. Dark of the Moon only gets the nod above Transformers, so above Revenge of the Fallen slightly, and that's mainly because there's a little bit less of the over-sexualization of everything. Little less jokes. He still does that to his female leads because that's all Michael Bay knows how to do. But a little bit less with the dumb jokes that didn't really go anywhere. The action was still, I mean, if you're going to talk about like action and explosions in Transformers movies, yeah, you know, that's always going to work. But even like the idea where they like shipped the Transformers off of Earth so that way the Decepticons would also leave. It's like, did you have any idea from like were you there like in Transformers and in Revenge of the Fallen? Do you have any reason to trust what the Decepticons say they're going to do. They tried to destroy the Earth once, and then they tried to do it again by literally with a Terra key and destroying the entire Earth. And you're telling me that you honestly believe that if you send off the only people capable of defending you against these things that you've been fighting for the past 10 years, that if you send off the only beings capable of protecting you from Decepticons, they're just going to be like, oh, okay, you sent away our greatest enemies. Great, we'll work with you. I know it's supposed to show how stupid humans can be, but sometimes I'm like, Michael Bay, you understand that humans are watching these movies. These are not Transformers watching them. We are humans and we are watching them, and it doesn't make sense. Coming up at number 3, this one was kind of hard to rank for me. People will probably disagree, but I have Bumblebee. And this is actually where we get to the good Transformers movies, and where these are movies that I actually can say I enjoyed. I think the only reason why it ranks a little bit lower for me is because they kind of went hard on the 80s nostalgia, and I'm not personally a fan of prequels and taking stuff back because I feel like it's really going to muddy up the timeline. If Bumblebee was here before, it really does confuse everything else about him already being here, about him seeming like he was on Earth for the first time in Transformers. And again, I know they wanted to do a prequel, but you just as easily could have done a Bumblebee movie set in modern times instead of going back. But like I said, it's still a good movie, even if continuity's sake kind of messes it up a little bit. And obviously they were ready to do a full reboot because after The Last Knight was so terrible, they were like, let's just do something that gets us as we can still use Transformers, but gets us as far away from those movies as possible. And so I think that was the right choice here. Haley Steinfeld was great in her role as Charlie. I loved her friend in that role. Even John Cena wasn't terrible in this movie. He's I don't know why we're still trying to make him into a Hollywood star, but he played his role pretty well in this movie. It still had campiness. It still had a lot of cheesiness. It still had a lot of times where the Decepticons were here and easily could have taken out Bumblebee and Charlie and got the information they needed and whatever. But of course, we have to have the hero live on, so it kind of bends to that will of the storyline. But overall, it wasn't an eyesore. And like I said, and it was actually kind of enjoyable. We've officially crossed over from eyesore territory to enjoyable movies. So there's not really a lot of mid with Transformers. There's just these 4 really, really bad movies, and then you've got 3 ones that you could actually enjoy. At number 2, I actually have the newest one that just came out, Transformers Rise of the Beasts. Trying to restart the franchise, even though this one takes place in the 90s and it kind of suffers from the same prequel things that Bumblebee did. It's a little bit closer to our time, but again, continuity-wise, kind of messes some things up. But if you're just completely restarting, and maybe that was the idea with Bumblebee, they just restarted and we can just pretend the first 5 didn't happen, then that works perfectly fine. But with this one, I enjoyed it. I thought that they corrected a lot of the mistakes from Michael Bay. No more overly, there was no over-sexualization of our female lead, and she actually was smart and kind of drove along the plot and was kind of responsible for the entire plot happening. Of course, this movie does have to have the MacGuffin in every Michael Bay movie that they had, whether, it started with the Allspark, then it was the key, then it was in Dark of the Moon, it was the pillars, and then in Age of Extinction, it was the seed, and then in The Last Knight, it was the spider crawling thing. Now we have the transwarp key. Another key. Woohoo. And so obviously the whole plot drove around that. But it was refreshing a little bit to see, we didn't have Megatron in there because there's only so many ways you can kill Megatron and bring him back. So, like I said, as I still like Megatron as a character, and I think he's the Autobots' #1 villain. But when he's died so many times, it's hard to understand how exactly is he always coming back. So this one was a good refreshing. I think Scourge was a pretty good villain. A guy that's serving Unicron, and all Unicron wants to do is eat planets, which is pretty similar to Galactus's origin. Doesn't really have a, you don't have to be this overly evil that's I just want to kill humans and see their death. He's hungry and he eats planets. we are humans and we're hungry and we eat chicken. It sucks for chickens, but it's great for us. Sucks for planets and sucks for people that want to live, but it's great for Unicron. So I feel like the fights between Scourge, we got to see how powerful he was, which was nice, because usually Optimus Prime kind of like defeats anything that fights him. Like, he's had some struggles, but for the most part, he had gotten to the point where he just kind of one man show destroys everything. And in this movie, seeing him struggle fighting against Scourge, like, I was actually nervous for Optimus whenever he was fighting him, because kind of looked like Scourge was kicking his butt very often, more often than not. So that was pretty cool. And like I said, I think Anthony Ramos, who's the main lead in this movie, he did a fine job. I was not expecting Pete Davidson as Mirage. I heard the voice, but like I just didn't realize it. And that's definitely what Pete Davidson would be if he was a giant robot. And that's all I can really say about Mirage's character. I thought that Anthony Ramos was, again, really good as his version of the lead. He got onto the Transformers are here narrative a little quickly, you know what I mean? Like, in the first Transformers, we see Sam, like, it takes him a long time to even believe, and like, we see the horror on his face, like, and I grew up watching Even Stevens, so like, it feels like we got to see that again from Shia LaBeouf, and just like him, like, not believing that Transformers are here, like, we felt that. And also because, for us, this was the first movie. Now we're on the 7th one, and we've seen Transformers so much, we as the audience don't really feel that surprise, and it feels like Anthony Ramos wasn't really feeling as surprised as he could have been by the fact that there were Transformers here. Like, pretty much, he spent one night with Mirage and then was all in on their mission. Granted, he did want money, but he was kind of all in. And then the lead character, the lead female role, she was very excellent in her role. And I wasn't really sure about the beasts, but they worked. Like I said, they worked. The whole film kind of came together. Michelle Yeoh's, her voice has got that sense of wisdom in it that really helped bring her character to life. And I feel like it was enjoyable. The only part that it really fell off for me was the Iron Man suit towards the end, where and like Bumblebee being resurrected by the Energon, I understand, and it created a cool comeback scene, but at the same time, even when he died, I knew that he wasn't really dead, because first of all, again, if this is before Transformers, this is a prequel to Transformers, well, Bumblebee has to be alive in order to be in the first Transformers movie. So that defeats that one. Secondly, it's Bumblebee. He's never going to die. And that's kind of what they've created around these movies. And like, again, I've said it with like the Fast and Furious franchise, with Transformers, they keep finding ways to bring people back so when they die, you're not really worried. So when Mirage was getting shot up by Scourge, and he was like dying, and then he just woke up and wasn't dead. And then he's like, I need you to take the wheel. And now Anthony Ramos is like literally having an Iron Man suit. That part did fall off a little bit for me. I probably would have just preferred if Mirage just kept fighting Scourge and he and Optimus had to take down Scourge themselves. Something like that. I don't know. But I did think the Beasts ended up being cooler than I thought they would. Especially once we saw, like the cheetah transform into their robot form. It was cool because it was very acrobatic and like you could tell their different strengths, and like, Optimus Primal had the girth to like just knock out that war and that battle. And that battle was very enjoyable. I kind of would have loved to see more of that battle keep going on. Like, they could have just continued that and just really cut out the Iron Man suit part. Because it's not like it's not believable, but it's also not really that believable. And it's mainly just because we've seen Tony Stark suit up. It's like one of those things, it's like it would have worked in the movies if Iron Man hadn't been the big part of the MCU for the past like 10 years. In any other movie, maybe it would have worked. And it's not to say like this should be compared to Marvel, but it's always going to look like you're copying it. And yes, Transformers came up with robots before the MCU did, but humans being in those robots has already been done by the MCU and done quite well. So, I also didn't really understand, like, was Mirage, like, around Anthony Ramos and then, like, he transformed back into the car when he came back at the end of the movie? Don't really know. Like I said, the Transformers movies all suffer from the same thing. They don't really know how to kill characters and make us feel sad because of it. But, again, this movie at least attempted It was palatable. I could watch it. I wasn't cringing. It was a solid film. It was a very solid film. And at number 1, I have to give it to the original. It is Transformers. This is the movie that set off this entire franchise. And in some ways, we are better for it. And in some ways, we as a society, I feel like, are worse off for this movie being made. We've gotten a lot more bad than we have good after this movie came out for the Transformers franchise. But Shia LaBeouf really shined as Sam Witwicky. Again, for anyone who grew up watching Even Stevens like me, seeing him bring all of that, like that, the facial expressions that he makes and just his nature of like hopping around and like, bouncing back and forth. Like it was really good to see that character, dragged into this world of massive alien robots. And obviously he was very confused. And it was hilarious. Like that Transformers is one of the movies that did make me laugh out loud multiple times when I saw it because of the way Shia LaBeouf played his character. Megan Fox didn't really do much in the movie. Again, she was, hate to say it, but Michael Bay kind of threw her in there for like eye candy, which is what he likes to do in a lot of his roles, in a lot of his movies. But even still, when Bumblebee lost his leg, she still drove him around and he still shot. And like, that was cool. And that was one of the cool fight scenes. Tyrese Gibson was in this movie and he was fantastic in his role along with Josh Duhamel, the way that they were fighting those Transformers in the desert. And then not to mention, like, Anthony Anderson was so good. So good to have him in this movie. I don't know why they couldn't get him back for a second one. Maybe he was too expensive. But having him in it definitely would have made all of them better because he was one of the ones that stole the show whenever he was on screen. And it was amazing. And so, like I said, Transformers is one of the ones I would watch it over any of the rest of the movies any day. I feel like it actually had a cohesive plot. The things that seemed unrealistic were just the fact that we had alien robots, if that makes any sense. Everything else to do with the movie, I feel like I got. The only thing that was like, okay, I'm having a hard time believing that is just the fact that there are giant alien robots walking around. You know what I mean? Like, that's the only fantastical part of the plot. And it's not a perfect movie by any means, but it's definitely the strongest, definitely the most complete. And I don't know where Michael Bay went wrong and why he couldn't recreate this movie. I don't know if he hired a different screenwriter or what happened, but it's a shame because this will always show what could have been. Because now that you've established Bumblebee, Sam Witwicky, these characters, building on it could have taken it to the next height and given us a much more interesting villain or something like that. However, they didn't really build on it very well, as you can see. So, these are my rankings for the Transformers movies. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know if you liked let me know if you liked Rise of the Beasts. And until next time, Blurs. And hopefully I'm going to drop another one about Mission Impossible coming up pretty soon. I'll probably wait till I see it in theaters. But that will be coming out soon. But, for right now, let me know what you thought about Rise of the Beasts, about the Transformers franchise as a whole. What are your top Transformers movies? And until next time, Blurs.